Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bible study this week. So, this week we're going to be taking a look at John chapter 15, verses 9 to 17. And we're going to continue on in our passage in John, uh, just helping us to sort of get a clearer sense of um, the idea of how Jesus views his relationship with us. Um, and so each week that we've been kind of looking at this, it's building on this concept and helping us to develop this idea of Jesus' relationship. And we started with Jesus as the shepherd on Shepherd Sunday, and then we went last week and we talked about Jesus as the vine. Um, and today we're going to talk about Jesus as our friend and what that means for us. So here is John chapter 15, verses 9 to 17. Jesus said, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I am giving you these commandments so that you may love one another." So as we look at this text, of course, so one of the things that pops out to us is the commandment, the greatest commandment, to love one another as I have loved you. And I want to talk a little bit about the idea of Jesus as love and this idea of abiding in Jesus' love, as he says in verse 9. So, as the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. Um, the idea here isn't so much that we look at Jesus as an example of love, but rather that we see Jesus as the source of love. That everything that he did, everything that he taught, the experiences, the healing, the teaching, the preaching, all of those things are the source of love for us. And so we talked a little bit about the word abide last week and this idea of dwelling in or living in, this idea that Jesus' love abides in us, and that the relationship is reciprocal in the sense that we respond um, by fulfilling that love in our lives, and that allows us to abide in Jesus' love. And so he goes on to say that he gives us a commandment to love one another as I have loved you. And of course, the greatest commandment, I think also the hardest commandment for us to accomplish. Because, it's not just a suggestion, it's not just something like, hey, you should think about doing this. Jesus is giving us a command that I want you to love one another in the same way that I have loved you. And of course, the way that Jesus has loved us is being willing to lay down his life, to sacrifice his life. And so, what he's calling us to do in our relationships is to be willing to sacrifice ourselves for someone else, for the people that we are in relationship with. And Jesus isn't picking and choosing who those folks are, he's doing this for everyone. Um, so I think that's something that's really important for us to think about and reflect on as we look at this text. The other thing is this idea of friend. In a New Testament Greek, when you hear the word friend, there's basically two different types of friendship, not necessarily the way that we think about it. At least one of them is very different. Um, there's there In biblical times, the idea of friendship kind of took shape in two different ways. The first would have been in sort of like a client patron sort of relationship, and Jesus talks about that here. He says that I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends. And so he's determining that the kind of friendship he's talking about is not this type of client patron um, relationship or friendship, but a deeper friendship, the one I think that we are more familiar with. This idea that we care for our friends, that our friends are people who challenge us, that love us, that walk alongside us, that are willing to sacrifice themselves on our behalf. That is Jesus' desire for friendship in our relationship with Him. And so what he's saying is, I want you to show that same kind of friendship to one another. So I thought what we could do today is reflect on this idea of friendship. What do you think it means that Jesus has called you friend? What does that friendship look like to you in the sense of how Jesus is our friend? How have you experienced that in your life? And then the second one is, given those experiences of Jesus' friendship and Jesus' desire to abide in us through love, um, how do we replicate that same kind of friendship in the relationships that we have? So take some time and reflect on those ideas. And again, as we've talked about before, I'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and send me an email or a text message. You can also put a comment up on Facebook, however you'd like to do that. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. Thanks so much for joining me for Bible study this week, and I will see you next week.